Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for SMCC May webinar, Leading Corporate Change Through Diversity and Inclusion. My name is Marcia Gay Knight, and I'm a member of the SMCC DE&I committee. Before we get started, just wanted to share some housekeeping notes with you. We are using the YouTube platform for this webinar, and here are a few things to keep in mind regarding the chat feature to engage the speakers and a few of the audience members as we go ahead. Also note that the session will be recorded and available for registrants after the event. Please check out our last month's webinar that took place in April, and it's available on YouTube, and the link is clearly public. So please feel free to share that amongst your networks to get the word out about the great content that SMCC has to offer. SMCC would like to take the chance to thank our foundational partners. Without their support, we would not be able to host these great events and initiatives. So thank you so much to our partners for their continued contributions and support. We are so excited for today's panels. And when I say panels, I mean two of them, because we'll be hosting two today. We're so pumped about that, which will feature notable professionals from the sponsorship marketing world who are working to push the envelope with DE&I in the industry. Before we kick off with that, we just wanted to share some insights with you. A number of Canadian sports fans shared their thoughts as how they feel about the idea of diversity and inclusion. So a strong majority of Canadian sports fans feel that the issue of diversity and inclusion is important, but for the world, more so than them personally. After this session today, we're hoping that the discussions that have been had would give insight as to why DE&I is important on a personal level and not just holistically. SMCC values your input, and we will be deploying a survey throughout today's webinar. We would appreciate it if you take a few minutes to fill out this survey by scanning the QR code on your screen. Open your camera app and take a picture. Click the drop-down menu that pops up. Your feedback is crucial in helping us to improve future events and continue to bring thought leadership that helps you and your organization to succeed. So please share your opinion with us. We look forward to it. And in case you want an incentive, we got a generous donation from Canadian Tire, and those who participate in the survey will be entered for a chance to win a $100 gift card for Canadian Tire, which I'm sure we could all use right now during the pandemic. So I am going to head over and get things started. I'm going to intro our moderator for the first panel, and we look forward to what's coming up next. Our moderator for the first panel is Dahabo Ahmed-Omer, who is an award-winning leader and human rights advocate. She's the executive director of the Black North Initiative, which includes several signatories and board members from the finance services industry. Dahabo manages all aspects of the Canadian Council of Business Leaders Against Anti-Black Systematic Racism. Previously, Dahabo was director of operations with the Somali Center for Family Services and an employment equity advisor with Public Safety Canada. She's also a founding member of the Justice for Abdirahman Coalition, who advocated securing justice for the late Abdirahman Abdi and his family. Dahabo has many accolades, including many awards that she has won over her successful career. Just to name a few, Canada 150 Community Builder Award, the Hope Academy Community Contribution Award, the Ottawa Black History Community Leadership Award, one of the most 100 influential people of African descent under the age of 40, which is an award in support of the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent. We are so happy to have her here with us today, and head over to you, Dahabo, to moderate our first panel.
Thank you so much, Marsha, and thank you to the SCMM for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. We have some incredible panelists that are here with us today and that are going to be sharing their thoughts, their expertise, and their experiences with us. And I'll start to introduce them. I think you're going to have a wonderful time with all of us today. Our first speaker is Sheryl Johnson. She's the Vice President of Brand and Strategic Communications at Kids Help Phone, which is an incredible partner of the Black North Initiative. Sheryl proudly brings 25 years of business knowledge, agency experience, and personal passion to Kids Help Phone. Connecting brands to people and people to brands is Sheryl's passion, rooted in her strong expertise in research, insights, strategy, execution, and measurement. She's known for rebuilding brands by turning data into insights and using those insights to action strategies for short and long-term growth. Sheryl has helped build the equity, revenue, and profit for a mix of global brands as senior executive with Fortune 500 companies, including Kraft, Kellogg's, Intuit, and Manulife. And so welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you so much, Dahabo.
Our next panelist is Sub Niijar, who is the president of Mosaic. Sub has more than 20 years of strategic and digital planning experience on some of the most recognizable brands, including Domino's, IKEA, Under Armour, Best Buy, Molson Coors, Unilever, Kraft, and American Express. His career has spanned both agency and brand side, having worked at global agencies like CP+B, Ogilvy, and as well as Microsoft. Throughout his career, Sub has helped his agencies win over 175 creative awards and honors, including multiple Cannes Lions, One Show Pencils, and Grand Effie. He has also served as a judge on Effie Canada and the Marketing Awards and Media Innovation Awards. Welcome, Sub.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our last speaker is Teri Davies, who's the Executive Vice President and the Chief Human Resource Officer at MLSE. Teri Davies is a seasoned executive with more than 20 years of experience in senior leadership roles in human resources, which includes diversity, inclusion, culture, employee advocacy, and will join the organization next month as the Senior Vice President of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Teri joins MLSE from Royal Bank of Canada, where she served 14 years for the company in a variety of senior roles in the Caribbean and Canada, most recently as a Vice President of Employee Relations. She's widely respected within the bank as an active champion and advocate on matters of diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Teri.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be amongst all of you, first and foremost. As I'm going through the bios, I'm thinking, how did I get so blessed to be in the space with all of you? So welcome and thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be a really incredible conversation. I'll start with Sheryl. Sheryl, tell us, how has DEI positively impacted your organization? I know you're doing incredible work at Kids Help Phone, and you and I have spoken a number of times of all the things that we could do in life. I think we want to save the world. Tell us a little bit about how DEI has impacted your organization.
Well, thank you, Dahabo, and thank you, SMCC, for the opportunity today. Such an important topic, and I share your celebration, Dahabo, in terms of this wonderful, incredible panel and incredible colleagues around the screen today. So first, I'd like to say that DEI, and at Kids Help Phone, we actually call it IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. So we've really expanded the way that we think about DEI. And the first way I'd like to talk about how it's impacted our organization is I see more people like me throughout the organization, first and foremost. In every function, at all levels, we're seeing much more diversity across a number of different functions, a number of different levels. And that's all without having an actual process and structure in place yet. So our journey to IDEA has really just begun. So it was initiated and kind of started about a year ago. Catherine Hay, who is our CEO and president of Kids Help Phone, was one of the first signatories at BNI to sign the pledge to basically not just acknowledge that there is anti-Black racism, but that we were going to do something about it. And we were going to do something very specifically at Kids Help Phone. And what I want to share with everybody here today is that the path to IDEA for us, it's called IDEA or DNI realization, is not linear. We started a year ago, and we had some steps along the way where we involved a few consultants. We started up with a small group internally, a volunteer group, but it didn't change policy. It didn't change our DNA. And so I'm really quite proud. In the last couple of months, I've become the chair of the CEO IDEA task force. And the importance there is that, again, it's about being able to bake it into our DNA. It isn't a check mark. Did we do D&I? It isn't a check mark in terms of how many people we've hired. It's about building it into our DNA, ensuring that our policies from a leadership competency perspective, D&I is baked in, from how we recruit, how we communicate, how we, take a look at our vendors and suppliers. So it's all the way across the board. So how has D&I impacted our organization? It's driven awareness. It is absolutely building out a structure and a framework, and ultimately changing the policies for Kids Help Phone. And at the end of the day, it's ensuring that we serve. We're in service to 8.2 million young people who need us across Canada as the only 24/7 e-mental health youth service. And so we want to reflect those that we serve. And in order to do so, it has to be baked into our DNA. And that's what we're doing. Again, it's a path. It is a journey. It is not a destination. We're going to continue to work on IDEA throughout Kids Help Phone. We're going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to unlearn. And we're going to continue to action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheryl. And, I love what you said about this being really a journey. It's an issue that's hundreds of years old. It won't get resolved, overnight. And that sense of awareness that's been there now, and the fact that your organization is being impacted in such a way where there's sustainable change. When I hear you talking about policy change, I mean that's what allows us to work towards restructuring, right? And that's incredible to hear. And Sub, this leads me to you now, and I think it's. In light of some of the things that Sheryl has said and what you're doing within your organization, what do you think is the most significant piece of advice for getting started within diversity inclusion? It's such a big thing. And every time I talk to people, I'm going, where do we get started? How do we do this? And I'm sure it's different for everyone, but what would you recommend as sort of some of the starting points?
Yeah, and I think a great question. And I think, to build on what Sheryl had said, I think the key part of understanding is, this is a journey and not a destination. And I think if we can collectively understand that this is something that isn't time sensitive, that has an end date, but it's something that we have to embark on and constantly look at in our daily lives and our professional lives, I think that my biggest piece of advice is you have to just start. And I think oftentimes when you have topics like DEI that have leaders and executives who don't look like this panel, there is a level of sensitivity on, are they saying the right things? Are they doing the right things? And oftentimes that forces organizations to kind of want to put a pretty little bow on the package and really nail the 15 steps, the 36 policies, making sure there's no gaps, like you've lifted every other corner because they don't want exposure. They don't want to feel like they've missed something because of the leadership structure. But I think sometimes that gets in our way of actually making impact and change. I think the greatest advice I can give is the best thing you can do is just start. Find the lowest hanging fruit. Find the areas where you can make immediate change. Find the areas where you might be able to make short-term change, and find the areas that are going to take long-term change. But acknowledge that once again, that this is a journey and not a destination. I think oftentimes, when we look at it from just not only our organization as Mosaic North America, but some of our clients and what's happening within their organizations, we're trying to be too perfect to get to a solution. And I think like technology or like we are embracing in our world, sometimes beta is okay. Sometimes just movement and progression and making tangible steps is the start to uncover what you don't know. And I think that would be my kind of biggest piece of advice is, we don't have to worry about making it perfect. We have to worry about starting. And as long as we can collectively start and have the conversations, have the dialogue, and make the actionable change, we'll get to the place that makes it way better than it is today, way better than it will be tomorrow.
So I think as I'm listening to you speak, all I'm hearing is don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, because it's just, and we're sensitive to the challenges and we're sensitive to the realities, but we're also saying to ourselves, we can't afford not doing something right now. So just start and don't be afraid to do that. And that's great to hear. And it's, we're learning more than ever now that we've got to be really innovative and creative in terms of some of the things that we want to do and should be doing. And so leads me to Teri. It's we're living in a weird time, and I feel like we're doing things, we're making the impossible possible. I always say this to everyone that I speak to. And so what are some of the creative ways to proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities? How do we bring them into the fold and part of the solution?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I've heard the comments from Sheryl and Sub, and I echo much of what they said. First of all, I think you just have to apply a different lens and do it on a more intentional and consistent basis. So if you are looking through the lens of inclusion, think about, who is not at the table, whose voice are you not hearing, and what input are you missing out on to get to the best solutions. So from a recruitment standpoint, to me, the sky is the limit in terms of creative ways to reach underrepresented communities or just more diverse communities in terms of building your talent pipelines. I sort of think of it in terms of, a few distinct, touch points along that journey of a potential applicant. It could be at the time of intake. So, when someone is interested and actively pursuing a role within your organization, what signals are you sending intentionally or unintentionally that they're welcome, right? That they will be included and feel a part of that organization. So it could be, your website, your online recruitment tools. Are they built in a way that is easy to access? Helps the applicant feel that through language and terms that are used, that this is a place that they would like to join, that they are going to feel a part of the community there. And the list goes on and on. So it's almost the creativity comes in as you start to break down what may seem like a very big and complex process into, small bite-sized steps that you can step back and reflect on. Is this getting in the way? Is it actually a barrier to reaching those diverse communities? And what can we do about it? And so, it can be also in your outreach. Where are you going to source talent? Is it the same traditional universities that you've been using over the last 15 to 20 years? And why is that the case? And what is the ecosystem that supports bringing in fresh, new talent into the organization? Is that ecosystem actually diverse? And if not, where can you make some tweaks and adjustments so that there's just different perspectives about what is possible? What's the realm of possibility in attracting talent? And to me, when I think about recruitment and sourcing talent, building a talent pool of diverse individuals, it's an always on activity, just like sales and marketing, I would argue. You constantly are thinking about it as you engage with people externally, internally, at recruitment fairs, at events like this. How are we ensuring that people understand that our place of employment is one that welcomes people from all backgrounds? So I think creativity is important. I actually think an inclusive lens is the most important, because from that perspective, the realm of possibility opens up much wider, and you're able to cast a much wider net.
Teri, I'm mesmerized with some of the things that you said, because I'm saying to myself, there's so much that we can do, and we know that there's so much, but step back and do it in pieces, because that's how you're going to get there. Those incremental changes really are it really is the best way to do it. And sometimes when you take stock of some of the things that you've done in the last year or two, or even 5-10 years, you see the progress. It's just sometimes you don't necessarily see it while you're in it. And so, and that leads me to thinking about, this is a lot of work, and it can get exhausting. and there's this fatigue that comes with this work, and that means that self-care needs to be at the forefront of some of this work that we do. And so this question goes out to all of you, and maybe I'll start with Sheryl. What do you do when it comes to self-care? Like, what are some of the things that have helped you and helped others and keeps you going in this struggle and in this fight that we're all in?
Fantastic question, Dahabo. Couple of things I do for self-care. One, the fact that we now have more in our organization that, again, represent from a BIPOC perspective, we get together, more, I want to call it socially, but it's not formal. It's not, pinned into scheduled meetings, but we get together and we just chat. We connect on a more social level. And to be perfectly honest, in all the organizations that you mentioned that I've been at previously, I've never had that before. I've never done that before. I've never had the opportunity to actually just socially, on a professional level, meet with those that look like me or from a BIPOC perspective, from a BIPOC community. So that fills my cup. When you talk about self-care, that fills my cup. And I would just say, during the pandemic, it is challenging. You can't actually go out to meet with people. You can't actually go out to have drinks that you would normally have. So for me, personal self-care also includes just being outside, walking. I live near the lake. I'm very blessed to live near the water. And if I can take an hour in the morning, and that's my commute, if you will, I'll go out, get up in the morning, I'll go for an hour walk, and then come back and start working. So that's my commute. And that gives you my separation time between the bedroom and the living room, which is now my office. So those two things are the things that I've tried to do and tried to maintain.
Sheryl, listen, I'm making notes because if you're like me, you've gained some weight during this past year. I decided to step on the scale the other day, which was a massive mistake. And then now I'm going, okay, I've got to get it back out there and start walking again. And so thank you for the gentle reminder. I need to do that as well. So tell us what you've been doing to keep yourself up.
Outside of a big glass of red wine, I think a lot of it is just, as Sheryl pointed, I think it's making sure you are connecting with people to make sure you feel like you're not alone in this. That there are a lot of other executives, a lot of other friends, families, coworkers that are feeling similar. And I think understanding that whatever is, not only from the corporate world, and I took on this role at Mosaic in November in the middle of the pandemic. So I've only met, of 3,000 employees, I've only met 3 physically. And so, as we are trying to build a culture, as we're trying to build a team, it's important to understand that you're not alone. And I think whatever it takes and the services that are offered, or just reaching out to colleagues, industry professionals who if you think they're probably going through something similar, you're probably right. They probably are. And I think making sure you're reaching out and connecting and having those conversations is helpful to understand that, whatever you're feeling or going through is shared by other people.
No, you're absolutely right, Sabe. We're sort of alone together. Like it's this weird thing that we're doing, and you're right. I think just connecting with each other and even just having a chat with someone regularly allows you to kind of just step away and not working 14 hours, like 12. Like some people I know are working long hours, and by the time they're done, they just need to sleep, right? And so how do we stop and actually connect more? And I haven't met my team either. When I started September in Black North, I haven't met anyone at all. So everything's been virtual. So imagine working in an organization in this way. So we're being creative, and that comes back to you, Teri. You've given us in the last round, you gave us a lot of context around some of the creative things that we can do. What can we do to self-care in this space?
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One, I'll talk about the office environment, because I too started during the pandemic, and it's just amazing that there's so many people that I haven't been able to, and I'm also a hugger. So there's so many people that I haven't been able to either shake hands with or just hug to say hello. So I think what I am finding in this work, in this space of equity, diversity, and inclusion, is that it can for sure be quite heavy at times. And when I sense that that is the case in a particular meeting, I really try to make an effort to step back and ask open-ended questions about just like pausing the conversation to ask how people are feeling about what's being said. And it's really generating some incredibly, at times, raw conversation, but it's creating the space for people to just express themselves in ways that maybe they haven't done before. And then on a personal level, I have done what Sheryl has done and probably many others, and have certainly done a lot more walking during the pandemic, just to, walk in the woods or in around the schools that I'm located around, just to hear children playing and laughing when schools are in session. But just creating that space for myself to think clearly. And then I've also taken up skateboarding, which is, yeah, I know, it's crazy. I got a skateboard for Mother's Day last year, and that's my new thing. So I get outside with my kids and I go skateboarding. So there you go. That's creative.
Listen.
That's awesome. That's great. I can't. I'm petrified of skateboarding. I think I'm too old to break something these days.
I'm impressed by being on wheels. My God. I
don't know why I feel this way, but I feel that my legs are as reactive as they were when I was younger. And so I'm just thinking about getting on a skateboard and not, my reflex wouldn't be as quick to kind of do what I need to do.
I didn't say I was good. I just say I get on it.
Hey, that's a big first step, first of all. And so I know we only have a few more minutes, but I have one more question, and it's one that came from our audience, and I think it's a really incredibly important one. And the question is, what are the biggest barriers that you're finding in your organization, and how are you addressing colleagues in the organization that are not bought in? And so maybe I'll start with Sub this time around.
Yeah, sure. So I think, and I'll answer quickly just to give Sheryl and Teri a chance as well to pipe in here. I think one of the biggest barriers in our organization that we're seeing is obviously we're a large organization that has a lot of field staff, event staff, which typically is lower income, diverse staff, right? When we look at just the kind of the general makeup of the workforce, when we think of more of hourly labor type of work, it generally over-indexes on the DEI side of it, versus the corporate work and the salary work, which over-indexes or under-indexes and is underrepresented in the DEI. And so I think one of the biggest barriers is looking at numbers as a whole and as a collective and thinking you're doing okay, when naturally you over-index in some occasions and under-index in others. You have to look at it in the component parts, like, are we doing the right thing corporately? Are we doing the right thing hourly? Are we doing the right thing in different field or executive level staffs, versus, taking a broad brush and painting the whole picture and almost make believing that things are better than they are. It's not to that point, but I think that's one of the biggest barriers is we look through the lens of what we want to see. So just making sure we correct that.
That's amazing, Sub. I think that's critical items that you're mentioning there. I think there's many ways that we can do this, but great to hear from you around some of the things that are really tangible. So thank you for giving us some concrete ways to do that. Sheryl, what are some of your thoughts around this?
I'll be quick. I think ultimately the barriers that exist have been brought down because our CEO at the very top of the house has said that this is not only a strategic pillar for us, but it is going to be built into our DNA. So when you have the CEO that basically says, this is the way it's going to be, we're going to build it up. The board is supportive and, quite frankly, looking for that framework. It's difficult to see or hear barriers because it starts at the top and it flows all the way through. So it's in our measurements, it's in our KPIs, it's in the way that we do work each and every day. It's the way that we're, quite frankly, measured as leaders in our organization. So very difficult at this stage, to be perfectly honest, to be able to find barriers because it has started from the top and it is something that is flowing all the way through. The greatest challenge, I would say, not so much a barrier, the greatest challenge would be to be mindful of the fact that it is a journey and not to get to the point where, by March, we need to have this. By April, we need to have this. By December, we need to have this. There is a flow. There is a journey. There are milestones that need to be met. But I'd say the greatest challenge is being mindful of the fact that it is a journey, keep in mind what the long-term vision is and what we ultimately want to achieve, as opposed to finding the check marks along the way.
I love what you said, Sheryl. I mean, the fact that it's lead by example, that in itself creates such an incredible ripple effect across any organization. So great to hear that when we're able to do that from top down, that barriers are getting eliminated as we go through that process, and being kind to ourselves as well while we do that. Teri, what are some of your advice around this, and how do we not only preach to the choir, but get more allies into the space and get more people bought into why this is important?
So you just said it, Dahabo. I think it's creating a mechanism, in our case, for ensuring that we sustain momentum and engagement from our employees, and do it in a way that is a continuous cycle of communication, engagement, accountability. So we've actually launched sort of a governance model that includes employee inclusion groups, a cross-functional committee that's actually looking at our fan experience and doing it using design thinking, creating personas, and really doing that work to think about the end-to-end experience and making it more inclusive for our fans. And then a diversity leadership council that is going to basically monitor progress and hold leaders accountable. And that for us is very important at our stage in the journey of sustainability in this space.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about ownership, because that's and accountability through that. I mean, it's when you know this is something that you have to do and it's important to do, and you have ownership of it, it'll get done. And so thank you for that, Teri. And listen, folks, I want to spend the day with all of you. I don't want to go to my next meeting here, I'll be honest. And I want to make a point of saying, like, all the artwork behind all of you is like fascinating. From Teri and being on the lake to Sub and the forest that I see behind you, and Sheryl, I don't know what I see behind you, but I love the colors. And so thank you for being part of this panel. Thank you for bringing us so much insight and knowledge and allowing us to experience life through you for a few minutes today. And I'll ask Marsha to jump back on and introduce the next panel, who's going to be incredible as well. So thank you everyone for allowing me to moderate the session. And Marsha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dahabo. It was great to have that session. It was so informative and we got so much information. I think the major key from that was that this is a journey and not a destination. So we all should pack our patience and our empathy as we grow and learn together. And Teri, if you ever want to try, the Olympics now has skateboarding. So great to hear that you're taking that on. So as we get ready for panel number 2, I will introduce the moderator for that panel, who is Kwame Damon Mason. He has been working in the Canadian entertainment industry since 1996. Kwame got his name out there with popular radio stations like Kiss 92.5 in Toronto, where he hosted a 2-hour hip hop and R&B mix show, The Vibe. And in February 2001, Kwame became the weekend announcer on Toronto's first urban radio station, Flow 93.5. In addition to hosting, Kwame used his experience and expertise to help launch countless radio stations across Canada and has co-hosted with some of Canada's most well-known DJs. Kwame recently completed his first feature documentary film, Soul on Ice, Past, Present, and Future, a documentary about history and contribution of Black athletes in hockey. The film won Best Picture at the 2015 Edmonton International Film Festival and recently had its first American debut on the NHL Network. What's next for Kwame is a 30-city tour of the film in conjunction with the NHL to continue to showcase his film focusing on diversity in the sport of hockey. Kwame hopes to continue to create culturally vital documentary projects showcasing diversity, history, and the untold stories of those who need to be heard. Thank you so much, Kwame. This is great work, and we look forward to hearing what you guys bring on the next panel. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. And just wanted to say congratulations to the first panel. But I just want to jump right into it and bring on our guests, and I'll just introduce them one by one. Alica Hall, strongly believes in the transformation of potential of the arts to empower and strengthen communities. She has a professional background in strategic communications, having spent a decade supporting health and nonprofit organizations. However, she has a passion for creating spaces for artists to create, learn, and connect with new audiences. Most recently, she served on the as a co-chair of Pride Toronto, the largest LGBTQ plus festival in North America, which has grown from 10 days to a month. So I'd like you all to welcome Alica Hall. Hi, Alica.
Not good morning, good afternoon now.
Yes. Next up, Mark Harrison is a lifelong volunteer and entrepreneur. Mark is a passionate believer in purpose, be that brand purpose or encouraging people to be purposeful in everything they do. Believes that in 1994 led Mark to create an award-winning marketing strategy, the T1 agency and global sponsorship conference, Sponsorship X. More recently, Mark founded the Black Talent Initiative, a movement dedicated to creating opportunities for young Black Canadians in the workspace. Over the past few months, Mark chaired the Ontario University Athletics Task Force on Black, Biracial, and Indigenous Issues, co-founder of Park Street Education, the first remote learning school of its kind, and is also on the board of directors at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and a volunteer at CAMH Foundation. Welcome, Mark Harrison.
Thanks, Kwame. All that, and I still haven't produced a movie.
One day. Never say
catch
never.
up to you.
Last but not least, we've got Beckie Scott. She retired in 2006 as Canada's most decorated cross-country ski racer in the history of the sport. A three-time Olympian, Scott won gold in Salt Lake City in 2002, becoming the first Canadian and first North American woman to win an Olympic medal in cross-country skiing. Beckie is an officer of the Order of Canada and an inducted member of the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, Canadian Olympic Hall of Fame, and the Canadian Ski Hall of Fame. She is a member of the Alberta Order of Excellence, holds an honorary doctorate of law degrees from the Universities of Alberta, BC, and Mount Royal, and frequently works for CBC Sports as a broadcast analyst. She is the founder and CEO of Spirit North and is now working across 6 provinces and reaching over 6,000 Indigenous children and youth. Annually, Spirit North is recognized as one of Canada's leading sport for social development organizations. Welcome, Beckie Scott. Hi, Beckie.
Hi, Kwame. Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Great. And of course, my name is Kwame, director of Soul on Ice, Past, Present, and Future. I'm also a co-host of the Soul on Ice podcast on the NHL podcast networks and also a consultant with the National Hockey League. So first off, I'd like to start by having our guests speak about some of the barriers they face within each of their sectors. Beckie, how about you going first?
Yeah, thank you. So, I came to this work in this space after having lived out my own personal career in sport and a career and path that was largely, I would say, free of barriers. And, I had a lot of opportunities presented to me, a lot of doors open, and was really able to live out my goals and dreams, largely unimpeded. And so when I retired from sport and began to connect with the Indigenous community in Canada and understand and start to experience firsthand the barriers and the obstacles and the disparity that existed, it was quite shocking and quite disturbing to me, and there's a spectrum. So you sometimes you have to take it in historical context as well. So there's the visible, which are, the poverty, overcrowded housing, inadequate housing, lack of access to healthcare services, lack of access to clean water in some communities. There's food insecurity, unemployment. And then there's systemic barriers, that have been in place for decades, and that's underfunding of education, underfunding of child welfare, racism, overrepresentation in the criminal justice system, overrepresentation in the child welfare system. So So there is a myriad and a spectrum of barriers and inequality that exist in the Indigenous community in Canada, and all of this is, is collectively contributed to some of the poorest health outcomes of any population in the country, and we're talking about obesity, diabetes, addiction, but most tragically, I think for children and youth, death by suicide, which is in some cases 5 to 7 times higher than in the non-Indigenous communities. So the barriers are real. Some of them have been in place for a long time, and and they're enormous.
Yeah. Mark, how about you go next?
Thanks, Kwame, and thanks, Beckie. I'm going to pick up on 2 things that Beckie talked about. One is, I think in this space, we have to acknowledge the R word, and Beckie talked about it. It's racism. And I think we talk about these initiatives, we talk about DE&I, and we talk about inclusivity, and we talk about people and culture. But I would just propose that on May 12th, 2021, that not enough people are talking about racism. And when you look at Black and Indigenous people, that racism is violent, right? Like, oversimplify. Indigenous people were moved from their lands by violence, and Black people were brought here by violence. I was in a session a few weeks ago, and somebody talked about African Americans being immigrants. You're not an immigrant when you're chained and put in a boat and you're brought here. So I think the first barrier we have to look at is racism. When you still have things happening, my son is the news editor for the Del Gazette. He wrote an article about the Black Medical Students Association meeting in January being infiltrated by white supremacists calling the Black students names. So let's put the R word out there, and let's couple that when we talk about mental health and the suicide and those horrible outcomes are dramatic. But and that's got to be a massive focus. I also think every employer on this Zoom, every person who's thinking about hiring, every person who's thinking about how they change their system has to remember one simple thing about Black Canadians, is that the challenges started before they came to your company. That being Black, and I'm sure being Indigenous, is a mental health challenge every day, because every day we wear this outfit. So I think for me, those are the big 2 things I want people to think about. I really think that organizations need to put the R word into the discussion.
Yeah. Alica, thank you for joining us. Can you please add to that as well?
Of course, yeah. So I work in the arts and culture space at NIA Centre. We're building Canada's first professional multidisciplinary arts center that's dedicated to Black artists. And I've been asked, what does racism look like in the arts? And I think it's, quite at a systemic level when we think about the opportunities that are not afforded to Black Canadian artists. The first thing I would point out is that many of the artists that we work with are self-taught. They are not pursuing, a formal education in the arts, and sometimes that's because, they are the children of, a diasporic community, and your parents are like, what kind of money are you going to make in the arts? That's not a job for you. Another time it's because they're deterred from pursuing careers and educational pathways into the arts. But that means that they often lack the connections and the networks and an understanding of how to actually build a meaningful career in the arts. And I think, systemically, what we see right across the board in every discipline, whether it's music, theater, dance, graphic design, is that Black artists are underfunded. So when we look at our arts councils and the ways in which artists receive money to create and as well reach audiences, they're not getting the funding that they need to be able to sustain their careers. We look, for example, at Factor Canada, one of the biggest funders of music in this country, and they fund, projects by discipline. Hip hop is the lowest funded genre. And yesterday, Drake was named the Artist of the Decade, a hip hop artist from Toronto. So if we're going to ensure that there's another generation, there's more artists like Drake in a variety of disciplines, we need to invest in their futures, we need to invest in their careers, and we need to make sure that they have the opportunity to gain, commercial, partnerships and contracts that really raise their awareness and their profile. So I think, marketers are pretty aware of the potential and the power of the arts. We're seeing a lot more relationships between artists and, sports organizations, whether it's the appointment of Daniel Ashram the role that Drake is playing with the Raptors. But we need to be able to invest in artists at a grassroots level so that they can actually build those viable careers and reach those levels.
I feel you 100% because I spent 14 years as a radio announcer throughout Canada, and I made my very first film, which was a documentary. And I always wanted to go to radio and broadcasting school. I wasn't able to do that, so I had to self-teach myself to be that type of personality and learn that skill. And I never went to film school, and I had to learn on my own. And that's the one thing I hope that the next generation doesn't have to go through, especially the kids of color. They're able to go through somewhere and get that type of education, so it makes it a lot easier for them and get those contacts. But Alica, I want to stay with you right now and talk about the impact of the NIA Center has had. Like, I need you to talk about what the impact the center has had in the community and the creative avenues and pipelines that it has provided.
Yeah, we've been around for the past 10 years. We were born out of the Youth Challenge Fund. So really our initial goal was to support Black youth who were interested in building careers in the arts, pursuing careers in the arts, and didn't have those kinds of connections and supports. But our vision from the beginning was always to have a physical space, because we know that we're lacking that kind of infrastructure in our city, in our country. And it means that artists don't have regular opportunities to present their work, to showcase their work, and have just an ongoing resource, right? If you don't have the kinds of connections, networks, then you're not sure how to actually build a career. So having a space for us is really important. And last year is actually when we broke ground on our new renovation project. So we're going to be renovating 14,000 square feet into Canada's first professional center. And I think, when I think of, a person who's really benefited from our, organization, I think of a young visual artist named Chantel Miller, who was part of our first residency program. So we gave her access to free studio space, something that's really hard to find in a really expensive city like Toronto. And after completing her residency, she was able to showcase the work that she created through the residency. And ultimately, we do a lot of events with corporate partners where we bring young artists into their spaces and present their work. And so we did that with 2 of her paintings, and both of them sold for, I'll say $8,000. So putting real resources into her pocket. And when she was ready to decide that, she's going to take the next step, we supported with her with a letter of support so she could apply for her MFA. And she's now just completed her MFA at Boston University with a lot of scholarship and support from the university. And so she's going to be someone that you will see in the AGO in 5 years. I know that. And I think that's an important part of transforming the artistic landscape in our country.
Before we jump to Mark, I just wanted to talk to you about one more thing. We've talked about these little issues that are being against Black artists, especially in Canada. How does the Black Arts Center help address those types of issues?
Well, I think having a space is really important to have to ensure there's a consistent resource, right? One of the things we hear from a lot of companies as well as public institutions is that they don't know where the Black artists are. They're not sure where to find them, right? I know the previous panel, of course, is talking about that at a recruitment level. And so, I think having a dedicated place allows both curators, marketers, a variety of community members to build relationships with artists, to enhance their own understanding of the Black Canadian experience. We're going to have a multidisciplinary performance space where folks can come and see dance and theater and music. And all of those things help us to, better understand ourselves and the experiences of Black Canadians, and as well provide that, ongoing and consistent resource for Black artists.
Thank you. Mark, I want you to talk about the main idea behind the Black Talent Initiative.
Yeah, thanks. So, we're just trying to create hope and opportunity for Black talent. And when we originally started, our focus was really on young Black talent. But one thing, and it was great, we were having a meeting with an employee resource group from a big brand, and they said, you shouldn't be ageist, because as we all know, and we all have our journeys, that many people were steered in certain directions in high school that maybe they didn't get the career they're after. So we only launched in February, and what we've been able to achieve is we're now building a community. And the community really is corporations that are willing to go on this journey with us, different community partners who want to participate, and the talent. And we're building one big tent. So really excited. Right now we've got a little program going with Twitter under their Twitter for Good. We're getting young STEM talent mentored by global Twitter leaders. Tonight, we've actually got about 30 students from across the country meeting with 3 or 4 of our volunteers, including Tristan from the SMCC, to talk about what they need from us. We're just signing MOUs with a couple of companies. One, for example, is literally going to fund $40,000 a year internships for not at their place, but one of their clients, 3 of their clients, where we're going to take Black talent and put them in there. And then we're putting our money where our mouth is. We've hired 2 new folks to join us, the Black Talent Initiative. We've got a couple more roles, but really simply, we're a community of doers.
That's great. Beckie, you're a very talented lady, and I just want to know what inspires you about Spirit North and the youth you support.
Well, I think it's a twofold answer. I think in the broader spectrum and the broader picture, I'm inspired to be actively contributing to reconciliation in a way that's meaningful and impactful and measurable, actually, and we're addressing some of the most pressing physical, mental health issues. We're advancing education, building community capacity, creating employment in the community. And beyond that, using sport as a platform really to access and engage kids that don't necessarily always have that opportunity. Like there is such a growing body of awareness and research and evidence now to support physical activity for youth and their development. It's a no-brainer, and yet it's still not happening for so many kids in this country. And so we are really connecting that to kids and helping them understand the connection to mental health as well, and really addressing some bigger issues with that. Beyond that, on another level, I think on a personal level, I'm inspired almost daily by stories of impact, by the kids who we reach in the programs. I get texts and emails and calls almost all the time from our coaches who share a story of a child who, is walking a little taller, or is now talking about going to the Olympics, or trying out for something that they hadn't thought about doing before. So it's opening these doors of opportunity that the kids didn't necessarily have open to them before. And I think it really speaks to the universal power that sport holds to transcend barriers for kids. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter what their story is. It really does have the capacity to bring them to a place of belonging and inclusion and confidence and hope, like no other platform out there. And so that's what inspires me.
So how can corporate Canada help? I'll throw it to you first, Beckie.
Oh, for sure. I think corporate Canada can help, first and foremost by recognizing that they have a role to play in this grand ecosystem. We're talking about equality and inclusion and diversity today, and there is a really big role for corporate Canada to play here. And it's not just about, connecting to a charity or a cause that resonates with you and funding that, but beyond that, really bringing those values and those belief systems into your workplace, embedding them in your own, workplace culture, and connecting to them on a personal level that informs everything you do, every conversation you have, your actions inside the workplace and outside the workplace. But beyond that, I would say I probably speak for a lot of charities when I say that, part of our role is to fundraise, and it's a big part of our role, keeping the lights on and raising the dollars, drumming up the money all the time to fund the programs on the ground. So there's so many organizations out there doing good work. And I think corporate Canada to recognize these organizations, to connect to them and to support them, is really important.
Alica, I'll pose that question to you as well. How can corporate Canada support?
Well, I'm in a capital campaign right now, so I am going to say funding. I have a $1.7 million goal to build this art center in the heart of Toronto. But I would echo Beckie's point around looking at these systemic barriers. I think they're, similar across disciplines, and the ability to create opportunities whereby, young people might have a chance to, have a job or intern or be on a, direct pathway from, school to a creative field within a company is a really great way, I think, to address some of those systemic barriers. Providing mentorship, providing access to resources, amplifying the work that Black-led charities and Indigenous-led charities are doing in this country is another great way to leverage the platform and resources within corporate Canada to highlight both the issues, but as well as community-based solutions.
Alica, you know exactly what you want. So, Mark, I will leave you with the last word with the same question. How can corporate Canada help?
If you're leaving me with the last word, we'll be here till about 5 p.m. Eastern, just for the record. Beckie's going to miss her lunch. I would say I'm going to go in two different directions. I would say internally, I'm going to go micro. I'm going to say personalize. Don't create policy, create personal programs. Every individual in your organization, regardless of what sort of disadvantaged minority group they represent, you need to personalize it. On a macro basis, while we all need your money, we need the expertise and leverage of clout of corporations. And I would say that one thing I'd throw at you today, if we could get corporate Canada behind all of us with government, with all levels of government, corporate Canada has machineries, they have lobbyists, they have influence, they hire people, they invest in innovation and R&D, they pay massive taxes. They have a much louder voice than we have. And if you look at the governments that we're dealing with, we need them to hold up to their promises. And I'm not saying this on a political standpoint, but look at the last federal budget. Are those monies that are being allocated for these different groups going to be spent? Are they going to be spent with the groups like are being represented in these two panels today? Are the decisions made where that money is going to be spent being made by the people who represent these panels today? Those are big questions. And quite frankly, small charities and not-for-profits, we don't have the wherewithal. So we need that macro support.
Panel, thank you so much. You guys have been very informative, and you guys are doing great work in the community, and I wish you all the best going forward. And, I just wanted to thank everybody for their time and listening to Alica Hall, Beckie Scott, and Mark Harrison. Thank you so much. My name is Kwame, and we really appreciate your time. And yes, thanks for having us.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
So we'll pass it on, and we'll get to our next part of the program. And once again, thank you for allowing me to join. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Kwame. That was fantastic, and I just want to echo the vibe that has been, just flowing through this last hour, and just say thank you so much to Alica, to Mark, to Dahabo, to Sheryl, to Sub, to Teri, as well as to Beckie for just a tremendous discussion today. These are folks that are within our industry. These are folks that, quite honestly, are doing the work. They are executives at the highest level, and they're also committed to doing the work that we all want to do within the SMCC to have a greater platform for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm pleased to have been a part of this today. My name is Julian Franklin, SMCC Chair Board Member and Chair of the DE&I Committee. Just a few last things before we let you hop off for your 1 o'clock meetings, to give you just a bit more of a flavor of hopefully the continuation of your own personal journeys on what you could do as an individual, professionally and personally, and just continuing to advance yourself in this space. We do have a resource list on our SMCC website. It's up on the screen. Please take the time to go to that site and see some of the information that's on there. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. So please take a look and continue the discussion that we had today. Next, save the date. Our next SMCC event is coming up on June the 16th, 2021. A really exciting topic, how and why live entertainment will return back stronger than ever. We are all hoping for a positive outcome over the next couple of months, and I think this is a really timely, excellent discussion. So please put it in your calendars for June 16th to see how live entertainment will come back bigger and better than ever for the remainder of the year in 2022. And last but not least, just a thank you. We want to say thank you to everybody for your time today. Thank you to all the panelists again. We hope that you take the time for the survey that Marcia had alluded to earlier. Please fill it out. Hopefully you'll win that $100 gift card from Canadian Tire. And we wish you a happy and safe Wednesday. Thank you.